Jesse Tarrant with Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities. This is our monthly renewable diesel working group. Um, I'm always grasping at straws to come up with a topic to discuss. And this week, something came to mind last minute, and I thought I would review some white papers, so some published data that different fleets have put out there, talking about their sometimes called a pilot study, sometimes a trial, whatever they might call it, but some different studies that different fleets have done. I'm going to summarize them and show you guys what other fleets well around the Americas have seen. Um, so the reason I brought up that poll there is I was looking through some. I only done 3 polls ever in the last 3 years, and I thought, why not get some information from people? And when I was doing that, I looked back. My last poll was from our February meeting, and I thought I would just share the results. We had 17 respondents then. There were only 4 questions, and some of them were the same. Um, how many of these events have, or these working groups have people attended? We've had 5 plus, and 3 people who showed up to this was their first. So a wide range of first timers and veterans. Um, of those that were there, how many use our renewable diesel? 6 did, 10 didn't. And then this topic was with Arapahoe Basin, Colorado, their ski resort. They were going to present on their little trial. So we had that skewed the attendance, I guess, a bit, but we had a good attendance from Vermont, Montana, and Wyoming. And then what made you want to attend this working group? You can see the word cloud there. Pretty much people wanted to learn, understand renewable diesel and share. So yeah, guess I'll close this poll here now. Talk about those results next time, so I have something to talk about. So yeah, monthly we meet, try and talk about renewable diesel, whatever topic I can get to come to mind. I've reached out to a few fleets around the country this week, and I think I have some lined up. I've got somebody from Logan International Airport who might be willing to speak about renewable diesel, which we've heard from the East Coast, the Vermont and Maine groups, on what they've been doing there. But if we can get somebody from there to talk about it, that'd be great. I've reached out to Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. They're using a little bit of SAF. I think they might be using some renewable. I'll see if they can talk to us about something. I've reached out to the city of New York. I think we can learn a lot from what they've done. So hopefully in the coming months, we'll have some new faces to hear from. I mentioned this at the last meeting. We have a small grant to do ranch or farmer outreach in Montana and Wyoming. And so I thought I would mention this. And if anybody has any insights or connections or advice, please let me know. The goal of this is just to help the ag industry understand renewable diesel and how it can benefit them. So we'll be doing a couple trade show or conferences, conventions to discuss renewable diesel, and then trying to align distributors, consumers, producers all on the same page to just help spread the message and make it a little bit more easy for ranchers and farmers to try diesel. And then we're going to hopefully have a nice tool that will help fleets decide and understand why renewable diesel might be a good option. So I envision it having maintenance saving tab, what your goals are, and you can input a bunch of information and it can spit out something and tell you that the extra premium you may be paying is worth it. So I'm going to get like 5 quick slides here of just what renewable diesel is in case anybody's new. Renewable diesel is I can read this. This is new wording, so I have to look at it for a second. But it's a paraffinic hydrocarbon, and it's made through hydrotreating fats, oils, and greases. And then that's one of the ways that you can produce it. It's a drop-in replacement, meaning it meets the same ASTM specs as your regular petroleum diesel. It can be used in any diesel equipment, whether that's a heater or an engine or a generator. It works in everything. It's got very high cetane, so it combusts a little bit more thoroughly than number 2 diesel does. You don't have to add cetane boosters. It's very stable, so the oxidative stability, in fact, is higher than petroleum diesel, so it's the shelf life is a little bit longer if you're storing it in tanks, for example. And it's not biodiesel. I think that has gotten across quite well in the last couple of years. I get less and less of people conflating renewable with bio. It still happens, but I always have to mention that. This is from a few presentations ago, just illustrating the states that have refineries. And the two stars there show the newest ones that have come online. But for our region, we have Montana Renewables in Great Falls. We have Holly Frontier Sinclair, two of those in Wyoming, and then we have Marathon in Dickinson, North Dakota. And among these four states in our region, we produce about 20% of the country's renewable. Maybe that number has gone down with some of the new refineries open up, but it's sort of a significant fraction that we produce regionally. Comparing bio and renewable and petroleum diesel, again, the main big difference that sticks out here is the cetane number is much, much higher in renewable diesel. So that's something people are after for more thorough combustion, complete combustion. The energy density is pretty much the same across. Biodiesel might have a little bit less energy per volume, but the energy is pretty much the same for petroleum and renewables. Again, the oxidative stability is higher in renewable, and maybe the worst in biodiesel. You have a lot of algal growth, and bacteria can grow in biodiesel where that doesn't happen as much as in petroleum or renewable. And then the big deal for emissions is that the life cycle emissions of renewable are significantly lower compared to petroleum, up to 80% carbon emission reductions, life cycle carbon emission reductions. And then another big difference is the petroleum diesel has aromatics and a lot of different impurities, whereas the renewable products don't have those. Sort of a visual of that, you can see on the left, we have the renewable diesel, which is actually, every time I've seen it, it's a clear fuel. Petroleum diesel, it typically isn't clear. There's always some color to it. But it also contains petroleum, that is, contains some metals, some sulfur, a bunch of aromatics, a bunch of different molecules. It's a very complex mixture. Whereas the renewable counterpart is a very narrow range of these linear hydrocarbons. And so when you burn these fuels, on the right, you can see petroleum produces a lot of soot. And that's kind of why we have developed these emission systems to deal with that soot. And the newer emission systems do pretty well, and they get rid of that soot at the tailpipe, but it goes somewhere, and that's in the filter itself, which causes a lot of headaches for diesel technicians to deal with the DPF, regenerate, do the regen, sometimes replace them. A lot of issues are caused by these emission systems, and when you can use renewable, you avoid the need for these. You can leave them there, but you avoid a lot of the issues that come with using these emission systems. So again, I've shown this numerous times. It does update sometimes, but not much lately. The little circles are where you can buy renewable diesel at retail. You have 600 or 700 stations in California, a bunch in Oregon. I think there are a couple in Washington. It doesn't look like it on this map, but I believe there are. Then we have one here in Belgrade, Montana. We have one in Jackson, Wyoming, and one in Nampa, Idaho. And those are all part of Conrad Bischoff, or which is now Sunoco. On the East Coast, there's a station in New York, and there's one in New Jersey for retail. There may be others, and if anybody's aware of others, let us know, because we can update this map. This is on the Alternative Fuel Data Center alternative fuels map. You can also find CNG, propane, EV charging, and all the other fuels on this map. So I'm just going to quickly mention the California cases and fleets that have used renewable, but I'm going to get away from that right away because we're not California and they're ahead of us on this, and so I don't really want to use them as an example, even though they started a long time ago. But you can see up from that map, I just showed you all the locations. Everyone can pretty much use renewable diesel if they want to, because it's at so many stations. And at the same time, many of the cities there have been using renewable for over a decade. You have San Francisco. Oh, it's 2018. San Francisco's been using it since 2015. The Bay Area, a bunch of the ferries and boats there are using renewable. Oakland has been using it since 2015 and everything, the whole city fleet. I just identified some of the things, but it's everything that's diesel uses it. Sacramento uses it, San Diego, Carlsbad, all these different places have been using renewable diesel for a long time. And it's easy for them to do it. One of the reasons it's easy is because they have a low carbon fuel standard, which brings the cost of it down and brings it close to parity with the other fuel, so it's financially easy for them to do. But I won't talk about them anymore. We'll focus on the non-California fleets. On the left, I just wrote some of the ones that came to mind. There are some others in our region that are using renewable, but these are the ones that came to mind. So we have Stillwater Mine here, Big Sky, Yes Compost. I learned last month that Great Falls Airport is using sustainable aviation fuel. Wyoming, the airport is using renewable diesel. So is the county and the city there. Jackson Hole Mountain Resort's been using it for years. Then in Idaho, we have RAD Recycling. Idaho National Lab has used it on and off, and Republic Services has used it across the country, and I believe they're using it there in Boise. The white papers I'm going to look at are for the companies I've shown here, or the cities on the right. So I'm going to start off with one of the oldest papers I ran into, which is NESTE, which is in Finland, headquartered in Finland, is kind of where they started. They partnered with the transit system. I think it was in Helsinki, and this is this is 2011. This is quite a while ago. This is a 180-page white paper. They went through way more detail than you ever want to look at. They looked at the tailpipe emissions at different temperatures. They looked at the tailpipe emissions at different engine temperatures. They've done every iteration you can think of. So if you want some specifics and really detailed information, you can take a look at this paper. There were like 15 chapters in this, but I'm going to show a little bit of the cold weather chapter stuff, actually just one picture of it, and then some of the testing. But they partnered with Scandia, the manufacturer, and they put on 50 million kilometers on these vehicles for this study, and they ran between R30 and R100. You can see they had this dynamometer here. They testing emissions at different RPM. They did everything. And I'm not going to get into too much of it, but on the right is the cold flow analysis they did, and they did the different blends. And they had two different fractions of renewable diesel they had produced, and they blended them each in 30, 50, 100%, 0%, and they compared the different cold operability. So cold filter, plug-in point, and cloud point. Nothing you wouldn't expect, but I didn't read it enough to speak to the results in detail, but you can go look at that stuff. They concluded, I have at the conclusion, they concluded that, and this was a real seminal study because it was so long ago and they were some of the first to do this. They concluded that it works fine in cold temperatures. They didn't have to change anything. They had no issues with it. Kind of what we already know, but they were the first to publish this. And I guess if anyone wants to jump in at any point and ask a question or weigh in because they know something, we had Matt here from NESTE. He might know more that people might want to know, but I'll move on. This is what prompted me to consider doing this review. It's the city of Calgary. I was born in Calgary. I've been reaching out to them for the last 3 years saying, have you guys considered renewable? Are you using SAF? What's the city doing for this kind of? And they didn't reply. And so it turns out they had been using renewable the whole time, just never telling me this. I think they started in 2023, but I found this summary from 2024, and it explains what they did, what the results were, and what the next steps were. So the city has committed to reduce its greenhouse emissions by 60% by 2030, and they want zero emissions by 2050. So in this trial in 2024, they ran 300 diesel vehicles and equipment, two transit buses, and they used about 300,000 liters. So that's like 90,000 gallons of renewable diesel. This trial was between May and September, so they didn't do it in the cold months. And they switched all the pumps at 2 stations to only have renewable. They collected data visually. They looked at performance numbers. They had onboard telematics and fuel management systems. They compared these numbers to petroleum diesel, and they looked at the operation of the vehicles, some of the effects they had, improvements environmentally, and look at the financial case for these things and any maintenance impacts. What they concluded, the results were that there were no operational impacts, changed nothing. They reduced emissions up to 75%. They're all things we already knew. There's a higher cost. We knew that too. No changes in maintenance. Kind of knew that. Put in parentheses, extended intervals. They said there's no change to maintenance, but I believe oftentimes you can change your maintenance intervals by extending them. And they didn't mention that they did that. I've heard quite a bit that oil changes can extend significantly. That's a big savings. Also, you don't have to change your DPFs as often. They didn't mention any of that stuff in this. They saw no changes in power or performance, but they did see an increase in fuel efficiency by about 12%. I have heard this from different people. I never say that Renewable will do that, but some people have told me that they do see an improvement in fuel efficiency. Of course, diesel exhaust fluid consumption went down and improved diesel particulate filter performance. So these are all things I think I've been saying for years, but it's nice to see a fleet publish them.
Hey,
And so
Jesse,
yes,
it's Peggy from Vermont. I have just a question about how they calculated their GHG emissions. You know how we're kind of struggling with life cycle emissions and then tailpipe. Do you know what they
yeah,
did? And you can, I
on
mean, I
the
could check out the study.
yeah, the study probably won't even tell you because this is the study. It's one page.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so, and I didn't look too hard, but I didn't find any detailed analysis of what they actually did. It would be nice to know. And if you look back at that first study I shared from NESTE, the emissions, people are concerned with the tailpipe emissions, the fuel emissions, and those all change depending on the temperatures outside, the temperature of the engine. There's so many things, so many variables. So I guess you just have to pick where you want to stop looking and use those numbers. But yeah, if you figure out anything, let me know.
Thanks.
So they did in Calgary. They did have a biodiesel program. Uh, I guess they were running B20. They didn't really explain it much. They were running B20 in a lot of these vehicles, and so their hope was to replace this B20 program with renewable diesel, and they plan to expand the use at other facilities. They also wanted to. Well, it's not R3. It should be R30. They wanted to evaluate those blends R30, R50, and then R50 B5 to, and then part of this lower blend was to try and find something that will work year round and hedge the cost premiums. And so as I was finishing up that, I realized, well, they released something from 2025. So they have another study. I didn't find it for 2026, but so the next year they ramped up their kind of pilot study, and they used it at 5 of the busiest fueling stations that the city used instead of just the one. They used 2.3 million liters of fuel. So it's like 600,000 gallons. And they used it again from May to September. There were significant greenhouse gas reductions. They surpassed their green fleet goals that they had set for 2026. So they did better that year than they hoped to do the next year. No operational issues, maintenance remained the same. And now they've kind of done away entirely with their B20 program. The next step they said is to aim for they're trying to figure out their year-round blend. So that's where Calgary ended their study. In case anybody doesn't know, Calgary's here in the southern part of Alberta, just above Montana. It's 8 hours north of where I am in Bozeman. So then the next one I'll talk about the Rio Tinto mines. They did a couple pilot studies. They did one at their borax mine in Utah. No, that one's in California. And then the Kennecott mine is in Utah. So they collaborated with Cummins in 2022 and did a 7-month trial. This actually has fewer details than that Calgary analysis. They don't even show you anything other than what I'm kind of illustrating here. They said there was significant reduction in emissions, and that was it. Then I found the update, which was again just like a press release of half a page, and they said they continued the trials and they adopted RD between 2024 and 2026. I don't know what that means, but I assume they're still using it.
Hey, Jesse, I have a little
Yeah.
update on that one. This is Tom.
Cool.
Yeah. So Yeah, they kind of cut. They switched over in end of 2024, and they had a agreement with the Sinclair refinery, and the pipeline. They would just send slugs of renewable diesel to Salt Lake, and it was awesome because we were able to transition our ski resort in Utah, Brighton, to renewable diesel. But I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. But I guess recently, and I'm going to say this, but I'm not my facts are hearsay that they weren't meeting the quota for Sinclair to send those slugs, so it went away in Utah, unfortunately. And so we at Brighton, we used it all season and it was awesome. Team loved it, and then the supply just disappeared. So I don't know. I have some contacts at Rio Tinto. I'm trying to get some responses from to see what happened. And then maybe it was just a quota and they slowed mining activities, so they couldn't use enough. I don't know what it was. So it's unfortunate because it was opening up some supply in the Salt Lake area.
Yeah, and I think we were even getting some of that fuel in Idaho from that pipeline because that really helped logistics of getting it over here. I'm trying to see if we have anybody from
Yeah,
Idaho
because they
here.
can kind of just send it right behind, petroleum diesel. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously there's a little bit of mixture at the front end and back end of it. But yeah, so I'm trying to figure that out because we're looking at a Las Vegas supply of it potentially.
Well, I think we should talk with the Utah Clean Cities because um, with the consumption and their goals there, I don't see why the city can't become a massive driver of that pipeline and just send most of it there.
That was my next move is because they have their goals, and I mean, public transit, road construction, road plowing, all the things, right? I'm sure they have a pretty big demand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they focus a lot on electric because they have a bit of an inversion there, but the renewable should also help with that. But yeah, I'll include you. Maybe we'll talk with Utah Clean Cities and see where we can get there.
that'd be awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the input. Um, then I found a study by ExxonMobil. I guess they don't really have a fleet, but they did a fleet analysis of I can't remember how many thousands of drivers, and they had a bunch of things beyond renewable diesel. But I pulled some of the renewable diesel related stuff, and so there's a lot of surveys and talking with drivers and fleets. And on the right, you can see the biggest sector challenge, and of course, this is in Europe and North America. Biggest challenge that fleets and drivers owner operators had seen was fuel costs, operation costs. But you can see down there, number five is sustainability. That was a big challenge for them. I don't know why, but I would assume it's hard to electrify these things, so they think it's a little bit more difficult. So it is a top of the list issue for fleets in Europe and North America. Um, the cost of ownership, it broke down what the cost of ownership is for these fleets, and I pasted this here because the maintenance and repairs is significant. It's 9%, and the fuel is 20%. So I think by using a premium fuel like renewable, you can shrink that maintenance repair cost, maybe at the expense of increasing the fuel cost. But maintenance is a significant driver of cost of ownership. They're showing the evolution of European standards for tailpipe emissions, and you can see I cut off the years, but the but the different versions, the tiered emissions standards, have significantly reduced particulate matter and NOx. I just thought that was interesting to show people that these emission systems do cause headaches, but they also negate headaches by not polluting. This is a cool thing I may use in the future, but showing the emission system that has this emissions restrictions have forced to be developed. You have your fuel tank, you have a filter, and then after the combustion, you have your diesel particulate filter. You have your selective catalytic reduction to reduce the NOx and stuff. But the diesel particulate filter is for the diesel particulate. And of course, you have your DEF, your diesel exhaust fluid that gets pumped in there to work with the SCR. And this is where a lot of fleets have issues, particularly with the DPF system. So, I mean, if we all use renewable, we could probably get rid of all this altogether, but I don't see that happening soon. Another thing I thought was interesting was another significant expense, or they were actually, Exxon was talking about their additive packages and the different detergents they can use with their fuel to help improve combustion and operability of these engines. and they showed that this detergent that would dissolve some of the carbon particulate would help with the cleaner injectors in this case, and that would result in an increase in fuel efficiency of almost 2% just by keeping your injectors clean. And I bring this up because renewable diesel itself can do this. It will reduce the injector buildups, and you don't have to put detergents necessarily in there. And also it reduced the average diesel exhaust fluid consumption. So these are things that can be had with detergents, but I think you can also see similar benefits using renewable. They didn't mention that specifically from what I remember, but I think it is comparable. This was talking about the fuel awareness for a variety of fuels. We work with a lot of these with the Clean Cities, and you can see people are all familiar with diesel. 60% of them are aware of electric, and then everything else they're less aware of. So renewable diesel, only a quarter of the people are aware that that's a thing, these fleets, but they're aware of electric. And it's a little bit frustrating because renewable diesel is the easiest to deploy. They can do that without doing anything, yet they understand electric more than they understand renewable. So it shows, I think, that we still need to do a lot of outreach and education to help fleets understand these things. I think this was part of, you can see we're at figure 34, and I think this was 110 pages. It was quite long as well. They were talking about biodiesel. They went into biodiesel and showed some of the issues. And I think, again, this was for their additive packages they were trying to talk about. And you can see, I've seen this firsthand on the left, these clogged filters, not so much with bacteria and algae, but I've seen it with gelled biodiesel. Many times. I've probably changed hundreds of those filters. I've also seen similar to the right picture where you have things growing in the biodiesel. I've seen that too. So those are issues that biodiesel can encounter. So they did, Exxon did a study. Well, they've branded their own version of renewable diesel as ethos. I haven't seen that around here, but I thought it was worth showing that they're trying to brand a fuel branded renewable. And they show that using these fuels, and I think they tried this on a few fleets. Yeah, it's a case study. So they looked at all these different features, the efficiency. They saw no difference in fuel consumption. The performance was good. Emissions show fewer regens and reduced DEF consumption after treatment emission systems. And some reports favorably on odor. So there's no odor with renewable, or very little. So that's a benefit that people were talking about. And the exhaust doesn't smell nearly like it does with petroleum. So those are benefits that handling had experienced. Storage experience was excellent. No algae or bacteria, which is different than what they saw with biodiesel. So these are some of the pros and cons for renewable versus petroleum. Some of the pros or the reasons for switching is less greenhouse gas emission, fewer emissions, better fuel performance. This is what people said. I don't think it's true because you'll see they contradict each other. The OEM recommends it. There's government incentives, no upfront investment. And then the reasons for not switching were the high price. It's less efficient, but on the right, you see better fuel performance, but then half people say it's less efficient. So I don't know, or it's acting very differently in engines. Reputation, which it really doesn't have one in the US. Maybe it's a misreputation, misaligned reputation with biodiesel. And then some people say poor performance. So those are the reasons that these fleets had given to Exxon about why they may or may not want to switch. So the New York City report, I think I've mentioned this a few times. I've heard New York City is using over 1 million gallons a month. They're using it in everything in New York City. And I found this report. It's 6 years old now, but they actually published something, so I'd go over it. they pretty much said what we heard from the last three studies, and that's the maintenance hasn't changed. Uh, no reports of vehicles requiring extra maintenance or anything. They limited their first study here to warmer weather. They didn't use it in the middle of winter, so they didn't have much to say about that. No compatibility issues with any of the vehicles. There was a cost difference between Renewable, and so they paid $1.65 extra during this trial. Then I found an updated study 4 years later saying sort of the same things. This time they used 9 million gallons, and all agencies except for the fire department at this time were fully using renewable diesel, and the fire department was using renewable at 50% of their stations. They talked about EVs and stuff in here, but yeah, so that's what they saw in 2024. And then I found a letter by the deputy commissioner for the fleet management in New York City from February this year, and he said that today 95% of the diesel fuel used in the fleets is biofuels, mostly renewable diesel, and 5% biodiesel. All the city-owned storage sites only have biofuel. There's no petroleum, according to this letter. And I think this is a letter to senators or representatives for testimony. Something. They did a bunch of water vessels, so Staten Island Ferry and some others were using renewable diesel, and they've fully transitioned as of last year to renewable diesel. Police department, fire department, and the parks are testing renewable diesel in their own vehicles, I guess, on their own. Well, that can't be the end of my presentation. Oh, maybe I didn't add the rest. That was the last white paper. But I guess the summary here is that these were all or mostly northern climate fleets. They all showed there was no difference in operability, no changes to maintenance. Nothing really changed. They all said that the cost was a little bit higher. These are all things we've known. The thing that they've kind of danced around is the winter operability, and nobody's doing 100%. And we had this discussion before the meeting started with Carl that is a concern of his. He wants to do it, and I think you can do it. It's just going to take a lot more paying attention to the fuels and finding the right fuels and the right blends. But what I guess I would conclude is that any fleet can do this anywhere all summer, no question. The winter maybe be a little more cautious, as you would with many fuels, and dial the blend back. And then if you do those two things, you're on par with these major cities of millions and millions of people with many thousands of vehicles that haven't had issues. Yeah, I guess that kind of ended sort of abruptly, but I guess are there any questions or discussions? We can talk about anything anybody wants to talk about.
I would say we have run biodiesel B99 every year in the months that we could get away with it, and B15 in the winter, sometimes B50 in the shoulder seasons. And we've never experienced, I shouldn't say it, any of this algae problem, even on seasonal use machines that keep a full tank of biodiesel over the winter. And then when it's warm enough, we just start them and run them. And our experience has been that we just really haven't, we literally have had one engine type that we had trouble with. We did a lot in the early years, changing of sort of so-called rubber componentry. But since we went with Gates lifetime guarantee hoses on, we just haven't had trouble with that either.
Yeah, I think if fuel handlers or fleets or individuals take care of their tanks and keep their tanks clean, these aren't issues. But people typically transition not thinking they have to do anything, And if their tank has some water in it, it might not affect the diesel as much. And then as soon as you put bio in there, suddenly stuff can grow. And if you don't maintain things and change filters, these things can get away on you.
Well, and we filter all air going into our fuel tanks.
Yeah, so you're doing 10 times more than most people.
I don't understand why everybody doesn't do that, since water causes so much trouble in fuel. And if for every gallon of fuel you take out of a tank, a gallon of air has to go into that tank. And on a day like today, there's a lot of water in that air.
Yeah.
So we have the desiccated, it's a clear can full of beads that change color when they need changing. And well, as I said, we did run R100 for over a year. We had a perfectly good winter, and then we had a very bad event in December, and that shut off our supply. From our point of view, we don't need any convincing. We just need supply, and we need disclosure about the level of distillation.
Yeah, having a per delivery analysis of the fuel would resolve everything. I just don't know that is, if you're getting small volumes, people aren't really willing to spend that on a small volume. But
hey, Jesse.
Yes.
Jesse, I apologize. I'm driving, so I can't raise my hand. All that. I don't know if you can even see me right now, but
yeah.
Do you have a comprehensive plan? Of course, I'm mostly interested in Montana, but if it spreads to other states, that's fine, because we could use some border production, as I think there is in North Dakota and some other spots. Do you have a comprehensive map that would show, for example, right now, I can get a map of all the EV charging stations around Montana, so you can calculate how far you have to go in between them. Do you have something similar to that with RD that would show where you foresee where we would need to have production and then stations, getting stations involved in the use of it?
You jumped on a little bit after we started, but I did show this map, and I don't know if you can see, you don't have to look at it, but there is a map. It's on the Alternative Fuel Data Center, and it shows where all alternative fuels can be found. And I showed here where renewable diesel can be purchased, and it's really nowhere. One spot in Belgrade, one spot in Wyoming, one spot in Idaho, and that's it. As for production, it's produced mostly across half the country. So the proximity to production is not the issue. It's the retail stations that are willing to sell it or able to sell it is the hurdle.
Right. I've seen that existing map, Jesse. I apologize. I've seen the existing map. What I'm talking about is an aspirational map that would show where there is enough ground to produce enough fuel, and then with production being local enough so that it's reasonable to have it shipped to the stations. That's what I'm talking about, an aspirational map. Do we have something like that?
We could do that. I haven't seen it. We produce enough fuel here to supply most of Montana, and none of it has ever been here. So it's not that the demand and the capacity is not here. It's just that the driving force is low carbon fuel standards, and fuel follows that typically. Or as we do in these 3-state area, we pay a premium. I guess we have to have a willingness to pay that premium at more locations, and maybe that'll drive the demand and the availability. But we did have somebody here from Bozeman last month, drove from here down to California and back, and somehow did it all on renewable diesel. So I don't know if he filled up in Jackson or I think he went through Nampa and probably filled up enough to get to California, and then he was able to do that. So it's kind of like a nascent day of an EV where you really have to plan your route even more. At least have a backup of petroleum diesel.
Right. Yeah, with biodiesel you do, with renewable diesel you do. Okay, well, it's getting there. What has there ever been a proposal in any state to remove the state tax on renewable diesel because it's so much cleaner and better in so many ways, and then maybe put more tax on petroleum diesel to incentivize people buying it and stocking it and make up some of that gap?
The former may exist in some states, not not around here, but there have been bills passed in Montana that have helped reduce the tax of biodiesel. It explicitly said biodiesel because it was a 20-year-old a bill that had passed. I think it was a short-lived law. So that did exist, and there are tax exemptions for biofuel producers in Montana, so they can be exempt from property taxes. So there are different incentives like that, but nothing new that explicitly says renewable diesel. There was stuff that says bio.
Because
I
it's
guess,
not even in the language of most people yet.
yeah, it's not in Montana's language yet.
Yeah.
But I guess low carbon fuel standards and those essentially kind of are tax, uh, indirectly a tax incentive to use it and make the fuel be sold at par. But it is something I'd like to investigate further in Montana, is trying to incentivize somebody, whether it's consumers or producers or distributors, to keep Montana made renewable diesel in Montana. And there might have to be some kind of fuel tax incentive.
Right. I think you could do something with fuel taxes. Has there ever been an experiment study done on if you put red dye, for example, or some kind of dye in renewable diesel, so you could tell the difference in tax, not tax, be able to run it on the road, that kind of thing?
I like legit, like technically is I think is it's the easiest thing to do ever. I mean, you dye regular diesel to make a dyed diesel. You could get a blue dye and make renewable blue or green. Um, but I know each terminal would have to have that set up, and we don't even have enough. All the fueling racks in Montana, they're not even all set up for dyed. Like they can't even do dyed diesel at some of these terminals.
Well, and
So
Yeah.
those dyes are not something you'd like to combust and breathe. I mean,
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
there are two basic red dye materials, and they are, you're talking about a pint dyeing 1,000 gallons or something. It's potent material, and from our attitude as organic farmers looking at and compost makers looking to reduce uh, the toxicity of the whole of our systems. We buy when we buy diesel to blend with our biodiesel for the winter, we buy ultra low sulfur and pay the tax and get the money back, to avoid having the dye.
Okay. That speaks to my question, really. That's what I was wondering, if the dyes were so nasty that we wouldn't want to even have them. I was just looking for a way to get around uh, that tax issue, so it would be easy for people. But
and there should be a pretty simple way. I don't think it's to market yet, but if you could, I think, easily differentiate 100% renewable from a petroleum product. Like, and those tests should be pretty easy to make because it's a very different molecule. Determining the blend is a little more difficult, but it could be done. I mean, visually, you could smell the difference, honestly, if it's 100%. But beyond that,
so we got to train all the cops to smell the difference. Is that we're
yeah,
gonna have dogs,
yeah, bio
German shepherds?
dogs.
Well,
Yeah, bio dogs. Yeah,
I mean,
good.
in our case, if your use is a tax-free use, off-road, most of our use is, we don't mostly run trucks, we're
Sure,
mostly off-road. Uh,
sure,
it is inconvenient, I suppose. We pay the federal tax and we get it back when we file our taxes. We get
Yeah, sort
all,
of same as
uh,
gasoline, right? You have to do it for
yeah,
gasoline.
any of those fuels that are exempt. In the state of Vermont, actually, we file an affidavit that said that, and we don't pay the tax um, for the off-road use, but up front. But our vendor has to collect the federal tax. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
If you guys would get an independent person in Congress, then maybe we could get something done. I'm just teasing
Steve's always talking politics.
and making jokes.
We tried to get if Bernie probably would have won in 16 if not for the some aspects of the Democratic Party's behavior or misbehavior.
I think he won in Montana.
We'd be living in a different world, perhaps. But anyway,
I think he won in Montana in the primary.
All right. Are there any other questions or discussion? I don't want to cut it short. I'm happy to hang around. Um, I'll add another piece of information. The price of renewable here in Belgrade is $6 a gallon. So it was $1 more than petroleum when they raised the price. And the way it typically has worked here is they sell that whole volume until it's gone, and then they reset the price. So we'll be paying $6 a gallon until that tank's gone. But I mean, I still feel there. I mean, and that's the other thing that kind of has always bothered me a little bit. People saying they can't afford, their fleet can't afford the extra $1 a gallon, and then some war happens and everyone's paying $1.50 more a gallon. And they just do it because you can just do it. You don't have a choice. You can manage to do it.
Well, I will say your map is pretty dismal, for the whole East Coast. Well, I mean, given how technically achievable this is easily, that we're using so little in any place that doesn't have a tax incentive. Vermont, we did just fail to pass a clean heat bill, and the government, people were very concerned about the price. Though our experience has been that renewable has been really a few cents more than diesel over the period we were able to get it. It was
Yeah, I
not.
think as you can see, the refining capacity is not on the East Coast, and I think a lot of the stuff that New York is getting is NESTE's product, possibly from overseas or from Europe. That probably changes things a bit, but yeah, I think what you mentioned is spot on. That it's dismal retail availability, and that makes it a lot harder for people to try and understand and see it. And so, any work anybody has or can do from where you are, just talk to some fueling stations, see if they'd be willing to do it. An avenue I assume can be successful, it has been at one place, is to find retailers that have a number one diesel tank for the winter. Number one diesel really doesn't sell at all in the summer, and so they have a tank sitting there not making the money. And if you can convince the retailer to dedicate that number one diesel kerosene tank to renewable in the summer, it's a way that it's a low barrier for us to get a fuel into that tank. So I suggest that. Lou, you got a question?
Yeah, let me go back to this issue from a totally different point. Your discussion of Exxon was informative. If this is so great, why isn't somebody as big as Exxon really pushing the living daylights out of it?
Um, there's some people on this call who could probably answer that, like Matt, but I don't know how many of their refineries. I don't know how much renewable Exxon is producing, and so that could be a reason why.
That's not my point. My point is not how much are they producing? Why aren't they producing more if it's that great?
Jesse, you want me to jump in for a second?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, yes.
So I think the biggest thing is who here has a checkbook with a bunch of billions in it.
Exxon does.
Right, true, but now they have to do a conversion of a fossil facility, which then cuts the fossil market down, which is bulletproof, right? Just because one state wants it, 49 others may not.
Okay.
And then you also have to, it's growing, but there's the feedstock concerns, right? If you go spend $2 billion to build this plant, you have to be able to feed it for decades. So now they have to have a whole logistics chain set up for feedstock supply also, because you can't pipeline. There's not a Permian Basin or Bakken Shale full of used cooking oil, right? There's the logistics of touching all these places. And, kind of to that point, one thing I was going to mention earlier, when the questions about why can't we get it here or here? Why is it just the West Coast? Everyone can raise their hand and say, I'm willing to pay a little more, but you have to really aggregate, because now you need terminal positions to hold the gallons, the quantities that the local communities need. And, I know the Dickinson guys and some of them are moving on pipelines short distances, but there's pretty stringent regulations about diesel movements on pipelines across the country that make it hard to do. That we've got PA teams trying to change this, but you need dedicated tanks and terminals that are segregated from fossil products and segregated from biodiesel products. And it's not just picking up the nozzle at the pump. It's everything that's led up to that that's making it tough. And, I hate to say it, but California's LCF program really has driven this, because it's been around so much longer than other states.
Bottom line, it's investment squared.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a big one.
And most, I don't know what most, maybe I would guess half of the renewable diesel refineries are retrofitted petroleum refineries. Not many are built from scratch. And so that helps reduce that barrier. So the one in Great Falls was entirely petroleum. They retrofitted half to do renewable. The one in Dickinson, I think, was retrofitted, but it does 100% renewable now. So the cheapest way is to retrofit an existing refinery, but they're already producing fuel with petroleum products, so you got to stop doing that. And yeah, and then again, the feedstock thing, I presented on this a while back. Like the used cooking oil, Neste uses only used cooking oil that keeps their CI score low. But you can also use cellulosic material, wood mass, and a pulpy or wood matter, and that feedstock supply is much greater, but the technology isn't as ubiquitous for that. And so eventually, I think it'll be there when you get that cost down to produce those refineries.
Yeah, I think in the near-ish future, like one, don't quote me on this, but two, not in like the next 2 or 3 years, when the lignocellulosic stuff takes off, your conversion rate in the refinery is not quite as efficient as used cooking oil or animal fat or something, but the feedstock pool available out there is, 6 to 10 times greater. And you can also do, because it's a different technology, it's not hydro treating to do that. It's more syngas and things. You would have smaller facilities sited closer to the feedstocks, kind of like the biodiesel industry, right? All these small guys in the Midwest close to the farms. So when the ligno technology kind of steps in, it will definitely open up doors and change things.
Our understanding right now is that there is plenty of biodiesel at the Port of Albany. There's no shortage, and feedstocks generally, the United States is already importing significant volumes of used cooking oil from China, which has had some tariff discussions and issues. But the people we're talking to at the distributors like Sprague and so on say there really is no shortage of available RD on the East Coast. The challenge is to get to cloud points that are low enough for our winter use. We can buy all the RD we want today, is my understanding. Currently, we're running B99 this summer because our distributor has blending capacity and has been selling biodiesel blends for several years. They dedicated a single tank to RD, started running their trucks on it, had a scary event with some gelling, and it was down to our little, 22,000 gallon a year need. And so they've decided they can't afford to buy fuel for us and give it to us the way they've been giving it to us. We are discussing owning a 10,000 gallon capacity or more, but still doesn't solve the problem about that we may need millions of gallons to get a spec that will run in the winter.
I'm gonna cut things short there and stop the recording. I'm happy to continue this after, but thank you everybody for attending. Feed me any ideas, any information is great. I'm grateful for it, and I'm thankful you guys all showed up. See you next time.